The pilot looked straight ahead and saw only one thing. A cliff. Not a runway. Not a road, not even enough ground to safely stop an ordinary airplane, just a narrow stretch of grass ending hundreds of feet above the Italian mountains. Behind him sat one of the most powerful men Europe had ever known. In front of him waited almost certain death. The aircraft was overloaded. The air was too thin, and every calculation said the same thing. This airplane should never leave the ground. Yet more than 80 years later, aviation historians still describe what happened next as one of the greatest short takeoffs ever attempted. Because somehow, against every law of common sense, the little aircraft flew. Its name was the Fieseler Fi-156 Storch. Ironically, the airplane that would become famous for one of history's boldest rescue missions was never designed for combat. It carried no bombs. It wasn't built to destroy enemy cities. It wasn't meant to duel Spitfires or Mustangs. Its top speed was barely impressive, and many fighter pilots laughed the first time they saw it. Compared to Germany's sleek Messerschmitt Bf 109, the Storch looked awkward. Its landing gear seemed ridiculously long. Its wings looked far too large. Its cockpit was surrounded by glass like a flying greenhouse. If someone had asked Luftwaffe officers in 1939 which aircraft would become legendary, almost none of them would have chosen the Storch. They would have pointed toward the fighters, or the bombers, or perhaps the terrifying Stuka dive bomber. Instead, history chose the slowest airplane in the room. To understand why, we have to go back long before Mussolini became a prisoner. Long before German commandos landed on an isolated mountain. Long before Adolf Hitler ordered one of the boldest special operations of the Second World War. The story actually begins with one man, Gerhard Fieseler. Unlike many aircraft designers of the 1930s, Fieseler wasn't simply an engineer. He was a pilot, a brilliant one. During the First World War, he flew combat missions over the Western Front, gaining first-hand experience with the strengths and weaknesses of military aircraft. When the war ended, Germany was forbidden from developing a modern air force under the Treaty of Versailles. Many former military pilots disappeared into civilian life. Fieseler did something different. He became one of Europe's greatest aerobatic pilots. Throughout the 1920s and early 1930s, crowds gathered to watch him perform astonishing maneuvers that seemed impossible for the fragile aircraft of the era. Loops, rolls, hammerheads, spins. He understood airplanes in a way few engineers ever could, not through blueprints, but through instinct. Every vibration, every stall, every gust of wind. He felt them through the controls. That experience shaped the way he thought about aviation. Most designers chased speed. Fieseler chased control, because in his mind, an airplane that could land almost anywhere was often more valuable than one that could fly 20 miles per hour faster. The German Air Ministry happened to be looking for exactly that kind of aircraft. As Germany secretly rebuilt its military during the 1930s, commanders realized something important. Not every mission required guns. Generals needed transportation. Artillery officers needed observation aircraft. Reconnaissance crews needed machines capable of flying low and slow without stalling. Medical teams needed airplanes that could evacuate wounded soldiers from tiny clearings close to the front. Existing aircraft simply couldn't do those jobs well. Most required proper runways. Many stalled at low speeds. Some needed hundreds of meters just to take off. On a battlefield, that was a serious problem. The Air Ministry issued a challenge. Design an aircraft capable of taking off and landing in unbelievably short distances. It sounded almost impossible. Many companies submitted ideas. One of them belonged to Gerhard Fieseler. Instead of making the airplane faster, he made the wings bigger, much bigger. At first glance, the prototype looked almost strange. Its wings stretched far beyond what seemed reasonable for such a lightweight fuselage. But there was science behind every centimeter. Large wings produced tremendous lift. Automatic leading-edge slats opened by themselves whenever the aircraft slowed down. Huge flaps transformed almost the entire wing into a lifting surface. Even the landing gear looked unusual. Long shock absorbers allowed the airplane to survive rough fields, muddy farms, rocky clearings, and uneven mountain meadows. The first test pilots couldn't believe what they were seeing. The airplane refused to stall. It floated through the sky at incredibly low speeds. Landing distances became so short that some pilots joked they could almost stop before reaching the end of a tennis court. Soon the aircraft received its official name, Fi 156 Storch. Storch means stork. It was a perfect name. Like the bird, the airplane had long legs, graceful wings, and the remarkable ability to land almost anywhere. No one imagined those strange-looking wings would one day carry out a mission that would echo through history. Because while the Storch quietly entered Luftwaffe service, Europe was moving toward catastrophe. By September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. The Second World War had begun. At first, Germany seemed unstoppable. Poland collapsed within weeks. Denmark surrendered almost immediately. Norway followed after fierce fighting. Then came the lightning campaign through Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Europe watched in disbelief. German forces advanced faster than anyone believed possible. Behind those advancing armies, however, another aircraft quietly proved its worth. The F-156 Storch. While fighters battled overhead, the Storch performed hundreds of unnoticed missions every day. It carried generals to frontline headquarters. It evacuated wounded soldiers. It spotted enemy artillery. It delivered urgent messages. It landed beside roads, in open fields, even inside tiny forest clearings. The soldiers who depended on it quickly developed enormous respect for the little aircraft. Because when every other airplane stayed away, the Storch usually arrived, and that reputation eventually reached the highest levels of the German military. Even Adolf Hitler himself became familiar with the aircraft. At the time, nobody realized that within just a few years, Hitler would desperately need exactly this airplane. Because far to the south, his closest ally was about to lose everything. Even Adolf Hitler himself had begun to appreciate the strange little aircraft. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't the kind of machine that appeared on propaganda posters. Yet time after time, the Storch proved that reliability could be more valuable than speed. It reached isolated headquarters, evacuated wounded officers, and landed where no other military aircraft dared to try. Ironically, while the Storch quietly earned the respect of experienced pilots, Germany's strategic position was beginning to unravel. By the summer of 1943, the war had changed. Germany needed more than victories. It needed a miracle. Somewhere high in the Italian mountains, Benito Mussolini was being held under heavy guard. The prison seemed impossible to reach. Steep cliffs surrounded the mountain. There was no runway, no road, no safe landing zone. To most Luftwaffe officers, the mission was already over before it had even begun. No transport aircraft could land there. No bomber could even attempt it. No fighter could bring Mussolini home. But hidden among Germany's aircraft was one machine unlike anything else in the world. It wasn't fast. It wasn't heavily armed. It wasn't even designed to fight. Instead, it had been built for something far more unusual. To land where no airplane should land. To take off where no airplane should take off. The aircraft was called the Fieseler F-1156 Storch. With its enormous wings, automatic leading-edge slats, and incredible slow-speed handling, it could fly almost like a bird. It could touch down in spaces that looked far too small for any airplane. And somehow, it could get airborne again. In just a few days, that extraordinary ability would be tested like never before. The mission would demand a landing that defied common sense, and a takeoff that many pilots believed was physically impossible. If the Storch succeeded, it would become one of the most legendary aircraft of the Second World War. If it failed, neither the airplane nor the men inside it would ever leave that mountain alive.